Spring sunshine in Stockholm and life goes on much as normal. Its shopping streets are as busy as ever. And all this despite more than 100 coronavirus deaths and 3,500 confirmed infections.
In my opinion, Sweden is handling the crisis very good. And it's partly because I don't think I could manage being inside the whole day.
The government of Prime Minister Stefan Löfven has so far insisted on a measured response. It's very different to the lockdown in Sweden's Scandinavian neighbours, like here in Denmark. In Sweden, shops, restaurants, kindergartens and primary schools all remain open. In families, both parents usually work, and the health service depends on thousands of nurses and doctors with kids in school.
There are 1 million children between the ages of 0 and 10 in Sweden, and someone has to look after them. My son is a doctor, and the nurse at his emergency department says that every morning she wakes up praying that the authorities will not have closed the kindergartens and the schools, because then she loses half her workforce.
The country's health agency admits current policy may have to change, but it's sceptical about some of the more pessimistic projections driving tighter restrictions. Last week, 2,000 academics published a letter criticizing this laid-back approach.
Yeah, so there's been a growing concern, I would say, in the scientific community with the assessments and the course that the Swedish government has taken through this epidemic, and especially because there is really a lack of scientific evidence being put forward for these policies.
The head of the National Health Agency admits it is a high-risk strategy, but he insists long-term lockdown, ordered before infection rates get worse, is counterproductive. And for now, most Swedes seem to agree. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's bring in Anna Maria Corazza Bildt in Sweden. She's a former member of the European Parliament representing Sweden. Welcome to Money Talks, Anna Maria. Now, as we just heard, unlike the rest of Europe, Sweden hasn't closed its borders or its schools, and non-essential businesses are still allowed to operate. Can you explain the Swedish model to us, the Swedish response to the outbreak, and do you support it?
Well, Sweden has a less density of population than most other countries in Europe. It has, in some way, a different lifestyle where social distancing is easier because there's not the cross-generation contact that you have like in Southern Europe. The elderly live mostly alone or in elderly houses. Young people live on their own. So that's somehow easier. At the same time, it's a population that really trusts the authorities, especially the experts from the Department of Health. And so they follow recommendations actually without them really being rules. So there has been really a homeworking, which in Sweden, that is a digital country, is not so difficult to practice. Everyone uses digital means anyway. There's been very much digital schooling also. And definitely less people around in the cities. And a lot of shops have been closed on their own, cinema have been closing on their own, without that being a rule.
Okay, now the latest figures though from Johns Hopkins University show that Sweden, as we record, has more than 4,000 cases of coronavirus and that almost 150 people are died. Are you worried, and is there a concern in Sweden that perhaps this more relaxed approach could, in fact, jeopardize lives in the longer term?
Well, that's, of course, terrible. The authorities say that it's important to isolate the risk groups and the old people. And as I said, it's easier to do that in Sweden maybe than elsewhere. And that it's not sustainable long term, according to them, humanly and socially, to keep people for long, prolonged time in quarantine at home. And they say that they're going to introduce measures step by step as they are needed. Then Sweden not necessarily is the same as other countries. Well, I'm also Italian. I went through the beginning of the pandemic in Italy, February, March. So I feel very much hope that as Sweden started later, they will look at Italy and learn from Italy that was somehow the first in the front line. I also would like to say that there is a lot of mobilization of the healthcare system. The army is helping in creating field hospitals. They are buying materials. They are making places in intensive care. So there has been a lot of preparation. And thanks God, Sweden could do it by seeing what happens in Italy and Spain and other countries.
Now, recently, Swedbank forecast that the economy would contract by 4% in 2020 and that unemployment will reach 10% by the summer, and that's despite unprecedented fiscal stimulus. To what extent do you think the economy factored into the government's decision to take this approach with the outbreak?
No, I really don't think so. I think the government is led by the experts of the health, from health authorities, and their main concern, like everywhere, is to save lives and diminish contagion. There is a lot of debate on the economy, of course, because a lot of people have lost their job. A lot of, the tourist sector, the hotel sector, the commerce, the shops. It's been very much hit. But it's not what drives the debate, but not what drives the government decisions.
Okay, Anna Maria Corazza Bildt, thank you so much for shedding some light on the Swedish approach to the outbreak. Thank you.